Good evening and welcome to Athens City Council. It's Monday, May 21st at 7 p.m. Tonight we're in regular session, and so we'll be having a series of ordinances that will be read for the third time, the second time, and then also the first, and some other business that we will be communicating. Our first item of business is establishing a quorum. All members of City Council are here tonight. Second item of business is disposition of the minutes, and we have minutes for our regular session held on May 7th and a special session held on May 14th, 2018. And if I could have a motion for approval of these minutes.
I so move.
Second.
Okay, we have a motion and second for approval of the minutes. All those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Okay, thank you. We'll now have communications. Are there any communications that council members have? Yes. Councilmember Reisner.
All right. Something I think we are already aware of has been the papers and other sources, but apparently the Ohio Wildlife Council decided not to have a bobcat season, and I think that's in part due to our resolution that was passed here in council. So I think everybody here deserves a big pat on the back for helping.
Especially Heather Cantina.
Absolutely.
Really
Yes.
driving this.
Mm-hmm.
Good news. Thank you. Other communications from other council members? Law Director Eliason? Okay. Mayor Patterson?
I have a few items tonight. As council may know, and I know some of you were in attendance, Saturday morning at 11 was the Armory historic marker unveiling for Athens Armory Day. And during the ceremony, Amy, and I'm blanking on her last name, unfortunately, from Ohio History Connection, presented the city with a Ohio History Connection commends the city of Athens for furthering the knowledge of our state's heritage by placing an Ohio historical marker May 19th, 2018. It tells the story of the Athens National Guard Armory and its significance in Athens County. So this was it's very nice to have received. I'm going to frame that and hang it in the city building. And the second notice that we received, or at least recognition that we received, was from the State House, from Governor Kasich's office, again recognizing Athens, Ohio National Guard Armory as a historical marker. So just wanted to share that with council. Again, I'm also going to frame this and have this hanging up in the entrance of the city building as you come in. Couple other items I want to share. Since it came up last week, I do want to let everyone know, or at least inform you, and this is a report that we can make available to anyone who wants to see it, and in particular council. This is the report as of January 1st, from January 1st, 2018 to May 21st, 2018. I asked Deputy Service Safety Director Ron Lucas to print this for me, and it's a breakdown on the amount of diversion from the waste stream from the Big Belly system. And in the time span that I had just indicated, 39% single stream was removed from the overall, 61% went to landfill. So again, good news on what we are diverting at the pedestrian level as they're walking along and putting recyclables in Big Belly versus the trash receptacles, or the trash side. And the last thing I want to mention is comprehensive planning, the neighborhood open houses. We have 4 of them. The first one is going to be the Far East Side, which is scheduled for Thursday, June 7th, 11 a.m. to 1 p.m. in Room B in the Community Center, and then again 6 to 8 in Activity Room C in the Community Center. So June 7th, mark your calendars. The Near East Side neighborhood is scheduled for Tuesday, June 12th, again 11 a.m. to 1 p.m. and 5 to 7 at the Athens Public Library. North Side is scheduled for Thursday, June 14th, 11 a.m. to 1 p.m. and 5 to 7 p.m. at Highland Park Pavilion. And then, I've got 2 more, I'm sorry, 5 of them. West Side is scheduled for Tuesday, June 26th, 11 a.m. to 1 p.m. and 5 5 p.m. to 7 p.m. at Arts West. And the Athens South Side is scheduled for Thursday, June 28th, 11 a.m. to 1 p.m. and 5 to 7 p.m. And that will be at the OUN, Ohio University Inn. So those are neighborhood comprehensive plans. Paul Logue has scheduled these. These will be workshops for individuals living in those neighborhoods to get together and discuss some of the things they would like to see incorporated into the 2040 comprehensive plan.
Great. Yes, Councilmember Reisner.
Can I ask a question on that?
Sure.
How are the local neighborhood associations, or in some cases where there is not a neighborhood association, how's the word getting out to those neighborhoods that this is going to occur?
Hopefully it's going to be going out now that council is aware of these dates through city council, but we will put it on the website. We will reach out to those neighborhood associations that are active, and then those who may be inactive at this point in time, because there are still individuals, I think, who are identified as being associated with neighborhood associations. So we'll put a full court press on everyone in the neighborhoods. I will certainly be bringing this up at my weekly press conferences over and over again, but I believe Paul Logue will have this on the city's website if it isn't there already, but I will certainly encourage him to keep that up on high rotation so that people are aware.
Thank you.
And thank you. Good follow-up. And perhaps if we could have a PDF of that to council members, then we can do our job to, get it out to the neighborhoods too.
Certainly.
Great. Okay. All right. And I don't believe the auditor is here, so we'll move on from the reports and communications on to our ordinances for third reading. The first one is Ordinance 5918, an ordinance accepting the donations by TS Tech Americas, Inc. of 13.285 acres and Scott and Gwinnett Brooks of 0.284 acres, totaling 13.569 acres, more or less, off Kenny Drive to the city of Athens, introduced by Councilmember Fall.
Thank you. I move that we adopt 5918.
Second.
We've talked about this numerous times. It's very generous of the people who are donating to us, and it shows a lot of community spirit among the people. And it's a great opportunity for not only the city but the county and the region, because we can do some innovative and needed production of things like a fire safety center, training ground, other things that can be used for public safety.
Okay, thank you. We have a motion and second for approval of Ordinance 5918. Are there any other comments or questions from council members? Any comments or questions from the audience? Okay. All those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed, nay. Motion carries, and the ordinance is approved. Ordinance 6018 is an ordinance creating downtown redevelopment districts in the city of Athens, declaring the improvement to certain parcels of real property to be a public purpose and exempt from taxation, requiring the owner of the parcels to make service payments in lieu of taxes, specifying the plan for using service payments to promote economic development and job creation, authorizing the execution of an economic development plan, establishing funds for the 234 Washington DRD, Sheltering Arms DRD, and the Athens Depot DRD for the deposit of such service payments. This is introduced by all council members. And would you speak to this? Yes.
I move that we adopt 6018.
Second.
This actually is a really great opportunity for Athens. This DRD program is relatively new. That was just passed by the state legislature in 2016. So there's not a lot of them out there. Once again, Athens could become a leader in showing how that these things work. It also helps to establish the fact that we do care about our historic areas, our historic neighborhoods. And when it comes to helping put those together with economic development, shows that you don't have to destroy our heritage, just like the Armory, in order to get economic development and job creation. So it's a really good way of combining both historical preservation and job development. Thank you.
We have a motion and second for approval of 6018. Any other comments or questions from council members or administration? Yes, Councilmember Kotz.
Yes, thank you. And I know that the public probably is having a hard time wrapping their head around these DRDs. I am myself. I've studied it enough to have a pretty good idea. But I will tell you, I talked to an expert, an urban planner that was in town under a grant that the city had secured to have some contract work done by him. And he called this legislation, he called it WOW legislation. He said that this was something that he thought was really special, so I'm really happy that we are taking advantage of this and moving forward with this. So thank you.
All right. Okay, any other comments or questions? Okay. All those in favor signify by, and any other comments or questions from the audience? Okay. All those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed, nay. The motion carries and the ordinance is approved. Ordinance 6118 is an ordinance amending Athens City Code Title III, Administrative Provisions, Chapter 3.07, Administrative Departments, Boards, and Commissions, Section 3.07.74A, Establishment of Environmental and Sustainability Commission. And this is introduced by Councilmember Fall.
Thank you. This is, I move that we adopt Ordinance 6118.
Second.
Thank you. This is basically expanding one of our most effective and productive commissions to 11 members, so they can be even more productive. It's awesome. I love it.
Okay, great. All right, we have a motion and second for approval of this ordinance that would enlarge the Environmental and Sustainability Commission. Any other comments or questions from council members or administration or other elected officials? Any comments or questions from the public? All those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed, nay. The motion carries and the ordinance is approved. Ordinance number 6218 is an ordinance authorizing the mayor to make application and enter into a project agreement with the Ohio Department of Natural Resources and declaring an emergency. This is introduced by Councilmember Butler.
Thank you, President Isley. At this moment, I would like to make a motion to adopt Ordinance 6218.
Second.
Thank you. Simply, this is an ordinance that allows and authorizes the mayor to file an application and then, if awarded, enter into an agreement with the Ohio Department of Natural Resources, specifically for the Ohio Nature Works grant program. As we all are aware, ODNR does administer some financial assistance through public recreation purposes. I think my understanding, we spoke about this before, and as well in speaking with the mayor, that if awarded this, that money would be directed towards making improvements at Camp Rotan. Thank you.
Okay. We have a motion and second for approval of Ordinance 6218. Any other comments or questions from council member or administration? Okay. Any comments or questions from the public? Okay. All those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Nay. The motion carries and the ordinance is approved.
Thank you.
Ordinance 6318 is an ordinance amending the 2018 appropriation ordinance and is introduced by Councilmember Reisner.
Thank you, Madam President. I'd like to make a motion that we adopt 6318.
Second.
Again, it's one of those housekeeping things we have to do from time to make modifications to the appropriation ordinance that was passed last year. Allow me to read and refresh everyone's memory about what we're talking about. Section 1, the 2018 Appropriation Ordinance 15017 is hereby amended by appropriating from the unappropriated balance the following sums. $20,000 to Water Plant Fund 740-637 TC 500 for 2018 clear well repairs. $75,000 to Sewer Plant Fund 750-637 TC 300 for sludge removal and inspection of the portable generator, backflow prevention, and fire suppression equipment. $20,000 to Stormwater Maintenance Fund 755-635 TC 300 for cleanup for packing peanuts, to provide for 2018 GIS service and to cover a portion of the next ASWCD contract, and $5,000 to Internal Service Mechanics Fund 865-645 TC 500 to replace a failing computer, and the remainder for large tools for the shop, and increasing the total appropriations by said amount.
Okay, thank you. We have a motion and second for approval of this ordinance 6318. Are there any other comments or questions from council members or administration? Any comments or questions from the public? Okay, we'll have the vote. All those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed, nay. The motion carries and the ordinance is approved. We now have an ordinance for second reading. This is 5318, an ordinance authorizing 2018 street paving and repairs. This is project number 319, as introduced by Councilmember Katsas.
President Nisley, at this moment, I would like to suspend the rules for ordinance 05318.
Second.
And the reason for doing so is time is of the essence. We have to get this through at this point.
Right, we have a motion and second for suspension of the rules. All those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed, nay. The rules have been suspended.
President Nisley, at this time, I would like to make a motion to adopt
Second.
05318.
Second.
Gee.
Yeah.
It's that important.
Give someone else a chance. So we have a second.
Okay. Yes, we have a motion and second for approval of ordinance 5318.
And if I can,
Street paving.
and if I can just speak very quickly to this, how we got to this point. This ordinance did go through 3 reads, and at the 3rd read, we had to pull it back and amend it, because at that point, the Ohio University decided to contribute $400,000 and team up with us in order to get some of their streets paved, and hopefully bring the cost of the whole project down, which will allow us to pave even more streets throughout the city. So for this paving session, we are looking at spending a total of $1.1 million, including Richland Avenue, Union, West Union Street, and then a series of our neighborhood streets.
Great. Thanks. That's a good recap. All right, we have a motion and second now for approval of the ordinance. Are there any other comments or questions from council members? Councilmember Butler.
Thank you. I would just like to voice my support again for this ordinance. And I mentioned this last week. I'll mention it again. I applaud the administration's continued workability and communications with the university. I think we have a symbiotic relationship with Ohio University, and this again is an example of where, through collaboration, we're able to save the taxpayers some serious hard-earned cash. Thank you.
Okay. All right. Any other comments or questions from council members or administration? Any comments or questions from the audience? Public? We'll have a vote. All those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed, nay. Motion carries and the ordinance is approved. We now have ordinances for first reading. And the first one is an ordinance amending Title 11 Business Regulations, Chapter 11.04, Vending, Peddling, and Soliciting. This is introduced by Councilmember McGee.
Thank you, Council President Nisley. Everyone is probably quite aware of the substance of this ordinance. I have proposed amending a slight section of the current vending ordinance, and that would deal mainly with freeing up the parking spaces which are reserved for vending, freeing those spaces up on Sundays, and freeing those spaces up after the hour of noon. They are currently reserved until 4 o'clock p.m. This ordinance would simply lower that time to noon, with the belief that many of our parking spaces are not being used by vendors. Quite often they're not being used, and that the public should have the right to use those spaces. I can I can testify that this week I've noticed many citizens parking there in confusion, wondering why those parking spaces are empty. The ordinance would also, in an attempt to make it easier for the vendors who intend to still vend during the day, but might not be able to make it to the spot by noon, it would allow them to obtain a bag for the meter and bag the meter till 3 o'clock p.m., at which time the bag should be removed. So I had received some comments from some vendors who were concerned that they had other places to vend at, either the farmer's market or some other places, and they wanted to be able to come back to their location on Union Street, so I thought it would be appropriate to allow them to bag the meter. That is the substance of the amendment. It is not a great amendment to the vending issues or the vending rights of anyone. I know that certain members of council feel strongly that there are issues that need to be addressed, further issues that need to be addressed concerning vending, size of parking spaces, the amount of money that vendors would be charged, locations of vending. I believe that's all entirely relevant. I think the purpose of this is to free up these parking spaces that are not being used during this time period and to get it done within a reasonable time period. Should we choose to create an ad hoc committee or any other kind of committee to examine the further issues concerning vending, I think that would be an appropriate thing to do. However, I think that it could go on for a long period of time, and we would have the same frustrating situation for many citizens. So I would ask council to consider this mild change, and then, of course, I think, again, I would emphasize, I think it would be appropriate to deal with the other issues that arise from the vendor parking issues and the spaces. Thank you.
Yes, I see we have some comments. Councilmember Fall?
I have several comments, but just a point of order. What happened to the tabled? Are we untabling the tabled? So that's tabled still.
That was still tabled.
Okay. I think at this point there's so much confusion about administration of what one wants to do through this ordinance. Also, I think that it should be noted that the city has conducted a parking inventory, which I don't see as being applied in this decision. So it should be noted that the busiest parking time uptown is between 11 and 1. And so if the changes are at noon, that doesn't coincide with the very busy parking time. The busiest places are between Union and Court Street, and during that time, and only that time, the parking rate is close to 90% of spaces being used. Other areas of Court Street, from Court Street on up to Carpenter, during that time, with this parking inventory, it's only 60% that the parking spots are being occupied during this high volume time. And in the parking garage, there's more than 90 places during that time that people can park. So I don't know if this sort of, if it's a question, I don't think it's a question of whether there's parking uptown, it's these specific places. Now, maybe we want to look at doing some of the recommendations that the parking inventory report has put forward before we do other things having to do with parking bags and this sort of stuff. I don't think that this is a good way of looking at vending in a holistic way of dealing with these things, because then you get complete sausage for a policy, and that makes my little planner person goes, it just doesn't sit right to me, because we're doing it haphazardly and bit by bit. And the parking inventory hasn't been, involved, and council hasn't had with people who've come in from vendors, there's a lot of confusion because people are still wondering what's going on. And I think that we need to pull back and look at this in a holistic way, because it's not just about parking places. It's about vendors, economic development, bringing people uptown, and it seems to be all involved with these 10 parking places. And that seems to not be, for me, not to be a goal of what we want to do with vending in the city of Athens. So I would opt for getting it ad hoc and starting from looking at it from the ground and being like Athens and getting everybody involved and going forward with the parking inventory recommendations and vending recommendations to go forward.
Thank you. Councilmember Crowell.
Yeah, I would like to thank Member McGee for working on this issue. I would like to echo Member Fall's comments. I do think that we can solve a difficult issue both with vending and with parking, and I think by bringing in different constituents, both business owners in that area, as well as the newly formed vending association, we can perhaps improve the situation for all. But I do think a holistic approach is the proper way to go about it.
Any other council members? Yes, Councilmember Butler.
Thank you. I'd just like to add, thank you, President Isley. Just one similar thought that has already been acknowledged, but I want to say this. I think that probably my perception is that Councilman McGee is listening to his constituents and advocating for the need for parking. And that I hear and understand. It's something that Athens has been riddled with for a long time, concerns regarding parking. And so, again, I applaud his willingness to challenge us collectively as city officials to look at the concerns and needs for parking. And probably the onus then is on all of us to help acknowledge that we do have parking available. As Councilmember Fall just indicated, there's a lot of empty spots in the parking garage. And I know as both citizen Butler and then as Councilmember Butler, my views on the parking garage have changed over the years, and that I used to never consider that. I never considered the parking garage as an option. I just always circled around Court Street looking for a spot that was available until I started looking more closely at the garage. And so now I know the garage almost always has a spot or space available for me. And so we're probably, as a city, not doing a good enough job advertising to the general public that there is space available within that structure. So that's one thought I just wanted to share with this body and the public as a whole. So again, I think it's probably not necessarily, the issue isn't really with our vendors, but the issue is just trying to help communicate that there is parking available within the city. Thank you.
Any other comments at this point? Mayor Patterson.
I just have two, and I'll be brief. The first one is that I want council and the viewing audience to recognize the fact that we have the only place in the uptown area that we have actually increased parking spaces, metered parking spaces, is on the south end on West Union in that corridor, where we've added some in front of Bromley Hall as well as some down by BW3s. So, and that really hasn't happened anywhere else in the uptown area to where we've increased parking spaces. Second comment that I have, and this is one that I hope, Member McGee, that you've thought through with this whole bag idea, is if vendor X, who has a trailer that is towed by a pickup truck, and he bags it till 3 o'clock and comes at 3 o'clock or close to it, yet the spaces on both the west and east side of that parking space have cars parked there. I have no idea how that trailer is going to pull itself and shimmy its way into that parking space at that point in time. And hopefully you've thought that through with the idea of being able to bag those. I think that could be misleading to an individual thinking that they're going to be able to access a space if they're somewhere in the middle of those parking spaces.
Do you want a response?
I do.
Okay, well, for instance, if that person has the ability, and I would assume they could bag a space that's at the end of the meter. There's no reason he has to bag it in between two other spots. I think you have to look at some reality here, and the reality is these spots are not being used. The reality is that there are citizens in Athens who have a hard time going to the parking garage, coming up and down the parking garage when they want to do a little bit of business in Athens. There's a dentist's office right next to where these parking spaces are, with very senior citizens who are often trying to use those services. They can't use it because they have to go park in the parking garage because those meters are not being used, but they're reserved. I think it's ludicrous, absolutely ludicrous, to say that somebody might get parked in when you have 10 spaces and they can certainly reserve either the first or the last. Or they could ask one of the other vendors to assist them in the process. It's a very simple process. The real problem is that they're not being used. If they're there before noon, they can be in there. The other thing that this does is to actually allow them, if they're there at noon and they want to put their car in next to it, they can do that. They don't have to wait till 3 or 4 o'clock. It's simply a process. And again, I respect what council, the other members of council feel that this is some sort of piecemeal effort to deal with a situation. It's a piecemeal effort to deal with a problem that we have crucial and some of our best parking spaces that are not being used. It's very frustrating because I would love nothing better than to have the vendors vend at the assigned spots. I would love it. But if you look out the window and you see one vendor or 2 vendors, at the most 3 vendors for 10 spots, you have to wonder, is this actually working? Again, sure, let's have an ad hoc committee, and 6 months from now, we'll be back, and maybe we'll have a proposal that everyone will feel good about. I started this in November. And all that time, for instance, we've had one vendor show up and criticize this several times in this council chambers. That vendor has been there probably less than 6 times since November. So I just don't understand it. Thank you.
Thanks for the
My
comments.
point was not so much the parking.
We'll
my
get
point
one
was
more
the
point
bagging.
back, and then we'll go on, because we need to get some other comments, too. So you're, okay. Thank you. Have we got any other comments from council members? Or I think now, if there's anybody else in the audience? Yes, Ms. Roman, yep. You could just give us your name and address. And
Judy Roman, 12 Northwood Drive in Athens. I just wonder if you ever have any police patrolling in that parking garage? I mean, it's kind of, at night. I won't even park
There's
there.
closed circuit security cameras, and they go directly to the police department. So there is eyes on the parking garage.
Why wouldn't it be better to have somebody like maybe walking around there once in a while? Because where are the police? And it's the same thing with Court Street. There's never any police that walk up and down that I've ever seen. Patrol. Like you had all those walk your wheel signs, and half of those are gone.
Well,
and I just wondered why nobody is watching that.
Well, thank you for the comments, and good questions. And but there is some parking enforcement going on. Mayor Patterson.
You kind of hit the nail on the head. There's parking enforcement monitors the parking garage because they're up there making sure that someone isn't in violation of the time limits in the parking garage for those spaces. We do have security cameras. And then on the streets, we have parking enforcement that on foot is walking throughout the areas that you're talking about.
Okay. All right. Any other comments? Okay. We'll have considered this read for the first time. Ordinance 6718 is an ordinance approving the Athens Hawking Solid Waste Management Plan and is introduced by Councilmember Butler.
Thank you, President Isley. We did hear during committee meeting from, I addressed this, and we had present in the audience Mr. Roger Bale, as well as County Commissioner Lenny Eliason, to help answer questions. Again, Mr. Bale is here this evening. If there are any questions, this is a plan that needs our support and approval. I believe council members should be in receipt of the PDF. Some of the highlights from the ratification of their plan acknowledge that the district's new solid waste plan includes the following programming: curbside recycling, drop-off recycling, yard waste management, household hazardous waste management, scrap tire collection, electronics recycling, recycle day events, commercial cardboard collection, school recycling collection, residential education and awareness, commercial industrial education and technical assistance, litter collection, quote, buy recycled, quote, promotion, disaster debris management assistance, and financial assistance for communities and entities, among many other aspects of the plan. The City of Athens does need to decide whether to approve of the said solid waste management plan within 90 days of the receipt of the final draft plan. And again, council members and council was in receipt of a certified letter regarding this proposed plan. Thank you.
All right. Any other comments or questions? Yes, Councilmember Reisner.
I have one more of a concern, but I'm not sure if the plan addressed it or not. But it's my understanding that right now that in terms of recycling, the worldwide market for recyclable materials went down. It's in a slump. My concern is that my concern then is if there's no market or the market is depressed for the amount of materials that we're recycling, and I believe our recyclables have increased, what happens to that material that has no market to go to? Do we store it? Is there a plan to store it somewhere till the market recovers, or what?
And we do have Mr. Roger Bale here with us tonight, and who might be able to address some of that information for us.
All righty.
Thank you. Thank you for being here.
No problem. My name is Roger Bale. I'm the coordinator for the Athens Hocking Solid Waste District. And you are right. Currently, the commodities markets are quite suppressed. Some people refer to it as a green fence. A lot of our materials were being shipped across the sea to other markets, and those markets have changed a little bit. From the state side, we've not always used some of the stuff as well here at our homeland because we found it was easier to send it to where there was lower cost labor markets to handle it and deal with it. You ask what happens. The mandate for the district is still the same. It doesn't matter whether it's profitable or not. The EPA is really not interested in whether they make it a profit. They mandate that we do recycling, and they base it on access. Our plan is access-based, that we have access available to 90% of the residents in the district, which is the Athens and Hocking counties combined together. As far as the materials in the city of Athens, your single stream system that you have through your contract service provider, some of the mixed papers, the markets have got really bad. They went into a negative where they are shipping materials and getting less money than what it costs to ship it there. The materials are still being used and sorted, but it makes it really tough at the end of the week. Now, some of the other materials aren't quite as bad as far as the non-ferrous metals and some of the 1s and 2 plastics, but markets have always been in flux. You never rely on them. In 2008 and 2009, when I was running the operation, I went through a slow time like that, laid off 11 people and closed the Hocking County Recycling Center. So things will get better. I've talked to some brokers in the last 2 weeks, and they're not going down anymore. Maybe that's a good sign. They will come back. I'm not going to tell you when. If I could tell you what the price of fuel was going to be in 6 months from now, I'd be probably doing a different job than I'm doing now. And it's kind of hooked to the commodities market. But we're going to continue providing recycling, whether it's a profitable venture or not, because it's good for our environment. It's good for the next generation. It's something we need to do to preserve our natural resources. we need to be smart about how we plan for it and go about it. We might not be able to save everything today, but we want to save as much as we can. Does that kind of touch on your question?
Not really. I guess
Okay.
what I'm getting to is if there's no market for a material, whether or not it's mandated to be recycled or not, we could collect all we want. But what happens to it after we collect it?
It's still being processed.
But where? Who wants it if there's no market for it? You see what I'm saying?
It's not that there's not a market for it. It's not economically. It's not a moneymaker. Your glass is single stream. Mm-hmm. It's going to a processing facility. There's only one in Ohio. They process it. They separate it. They call it by size of a 50-cent piece, quarter, dime, and small. Mm-hmm. There's 4 different markets they send it to. The payback for your MRF, he's paying money to get it there. He's not making money on it. It's costing him to process glass. But we made a commitment to do glass, and we're going to continue to accept it. So what I'm saying is recycling is going to come at an expense, and we're always going to have to give it an assistance. It's going to have to receive monies to make it survive and continue on. The money's in the waste industry. That's why you see the large national accounts buy the landfills and take up the contracts and the franchises. Recycling is mandated by the EPA. For it to exist, it has to be subsidized. That's me. I'm the guy within the solid waste district that's mandated to take money and put it toward recycling so it's available. And that's why we have a 15-year plan. How are we going to do this? How are we going to fund it? And that's what I'm asking you to approve. We have a 15-year plan. We're not asking for any additional fees. My fees come from the trash that goes into the landfill per ton. I get $1 a ton for in-district trash. I get a $3 a ton generation fee. The previous plan, which struggled for the ones that was on council then and nearly failed, asked for a generation fee and was voted down by the largest city in Hocking County. It was on the last day, at the last moment, approved, contingent we do a feasibility study, and it was determined the district wouldn't build a MRF. So this plan doesn't show me having employees, which we talked about, and I don't have a MRF. Okay. I'm spending that same $3 to provide access to recycling to pay someone else to do the recycling. Your materials are moving, they're not going to the landfill.
Okay.
I am not going to, if I have to put $5 bills on the bales of cardboard to send to Fleming, Kentucky, that's what we're going to do. It's going to get recycled. We have to. Mm-hmm. Hopefully I addressed your question.
Yeah, that you got it there.
Okay.
Councilmember McGee and then Councilmember Fall.
Thank you. I had basically 3 questions. But
okay.
I would like to first thank you for the work that you do. I think you do an excellent job.
Thank you.
You mentioned that you had closed the Hocking County Recycling Center at one point in time.
In 2009.
How long was it closed?
It's still closed.
Okay.
It's currently a public drop-off. There's 6 containers there at Sutton Road. The pole building and the 2 storage buildings are used by Hocking County Sheriff's Office to store vehicles in. The salt bin, I store stuff in. Currently, all the e-waste I collect at the Athens County Recycling Day at the fairgrounds, and I say e-waste, computers, electronics,
right.
And what I collected last Saturday are in dry storage there, and they're going to be picked up by a vendor in about 3 weeks and sent to recycling. Okay. That's what I'm using it for. We never reopened it. We
okay.
Consolidated, lived on less.
Okay. Well, that might deal with the second question, which is basically whether there's in your plan or any kind of consideration of taking certain kinds of materials that we recycle that would perhaps not be useful, as you mentioned, the paper, and just asking the public to go a period of time and not recycling the paper. I mean, is that part of your plan?
In our plan, the 4 things it's earmarked that we will recycle regardless of markets is OCC, which is old corrugated cardboard. Mm-hmm. Yeah. UBC, which is universal beverage cans or aluminum cans.
Right.
Steel or tin cans. And the other thing listed, which is a 4th item, is paper fiber, newspaper, office paper.
Right.
I have to commit to 4 things to the EPA, regardless of what happens with the markets that we're going to do. And those are the 4 things we will do if it takes every dollar I have to recycle. I don't want to drop the other stuff we're doing, and we're going to continue to do it until I don't have any money left, and then we'll figure out what we're going to do there. But But those are the 4 things that we have to recycle to answer your question.
Right.
Well, go ahead.
The last question, which kind of ties into this, was real quick. Are you aware of any program or possibility for taking some of these beverage bottles and rather than breaking them up and recycling them as just pieces of glass, to actually clean them and recycle them through the process with a deposit that some states require? Is that in the possibilities at all?
Something like a bottle bill where there's a return fee. The Ohio EPA, about 6 years ago, we meet quarterly, Ohio, the solid waste district coordinators of Ohio, and they ask us to go to some meetings, and we solid waste districts in Ohio have an organization called OSWATA. We want a bottle bill. It didn't go anywhere when we tried to get it out of committee. There's a lot of pressure against it from both the distillers and the people that have the breweries and the bottle manufacturers. They kind of like when their trucks go out loaded and they come back empty. They're not real wild about hauling empty things back that might have, be contaminated or have bugs or have to deal with deposits. You won't get an argument from me, but we're going to have a change at the state level and legislative law for that to happen.
And there's nothing happening now?
And there's nothing moving forward. It was tried and it didn't go hardly anywhere.
Thank you.
The only thing I can say with your glass, I'm going to build a new recycling area out of some of your glass in the next few months. I'm going to use it as an aggregate and mix it with limestone and make a base. Try to save the nonprofits some money and use it in a local area. But I would love to have 500 recycling drop-offs, but I don't have enough money to pay for them all. So we'll do them one at a time.
Mm-hmm. Thank you.
Thank you.
Councilmember Fall.
I think it's important to, it sounds like we're subsidizing or losing money on recycling, but in reality, the EPA is trying to think big picture, part of it, because waste in a landfill is also subsidized to a certain degrees because there's all the EPA inspection and potential cleanup and all those sort of things. And we know as a society, virgin material tends to be subsidized in a way because it's a hidden subsidy with all the oil and various things that are given tax credits and tax loopholes and such. So I don't think that us paying to go and do recycling is really not much different in a model as us paying to do a tip, a landfill. But it's much better for the environment. And then when the markets pick back up, and we know that they will pick back up, we already have everything in line, we don't have to start over again. And so I think that's really important to understand that it's a responsibility of the people in the market, the people who are, creating this waste, to look at it from a long story sort of point. So I don't want it all of a sudden everybody's like, well, we shouldn't be recycling because, it costs us money. Well, all this waste costs us money. There's nothing that would make us money until the markets really go hot potato that would make us money in this situation. Waste costs us, recycling costs us. So I just don't want it to be
comment.
you see, people are like, I can see what my emails can say tomorrow. Well, why are we doing it if it's costing us money? Why are we recycling? Besides the EPA requiring us to recycle, that's a good thing because that keeps the markets open and stuff. And so we've paid to put, it's not really much different than tipping, putting in a tip.
Okay. Mr. Bale.
Your community in the city of Athens, the diversion rate is superior to a lot of places. You have a pay-as-you-throw program. It's volume-based. Your current refuse rate per household is real reasonable compared to statewide. So there's a lot of things to be real proud of. Having said that, I represent the whole district, and parts of my district are really rural, and they don't have access to density. So the cost per mile is a lot more. I represent everybody. I need everybody on board to approve this plan. I'm here tonight to talk to you and ask you, please, for your support and to have something from you by July 29. But when you ask me about the markets and what's happening with them, I have to be truthful. I'm not going to tell you, that this is happening or not. Something's not happening. But we've done a good job. Our diversion rate's way higher than it was 6 years ago. And we're going to be there to improve on it. You guys got some new programs coming along, so I won't help you anymore. But I'm not a direct part of that in the funding mechanism. I've been talked about, asked about it, and I've attended some meetings. I support it. But when I start a program, I want to do it district-wide. See what I mean? So when I do something, I got to do it everywhere. So I want to represent all of you equally. But thank you. And I didn't mean to give you a bad feeling on the cost of the markets.
Well, okay. It's understandable, but I don't think it's a time to just let loose, to cut the rope on our recycling, because it is going to go up in the future.
We won't.
Right.
We won't. We're always going to do it.
I'm trying to explain to the people out in television land.
Okay.
And that this is a good thing, even if it costs us money. It's the right thing to do. It's the right thing to do in the future because it's not going to cost us money in the future. And but if there was a carbon fee or something on garbage, it would definitely make more money to recycle than it would be to tip. And so even if we are losing money, recycling is the right thing to do. And I want to support that wholeheartedly across the district.
Okay, great. Thank you. Mayor Patterson.
Mr. Bales, I've watched you up close and personal through this process, and I give you a big thank you for all the work that you do. This is not easy. The district is vast. The district is rural, especially when you're looking at things at the county level with Athens and Hocking County in particular. So I want to give you a thank you for up front. Can you give council a sense of the financial assistance for communities and entities, any changes within this contract?
One of the things that we put in there, we wanted to have the ability to offer an incentive anywhere from a $5,000 to $7,000 per year grant from the solid waste district to any public entity that would want to start some kind of a cycling program. If this plan's approved, then we're going to work to put together the application process and what the goals and the guidelines would be offered on a yearly basis. One of the things we'd ask is very similar to what the EPA asked for us is how will it be sustained, and you have to make a commitment to do it for at least 3 years. And we would earmark the money to go toward equipment or something to start a process to improve our current recycling systems. We think that would be a good thing. It was asked during some of the meetings that it be a feasibility study, whether curbside would work or whether pay-as-you-throw would work or franchise. And the board essentially answered that by saying if a political entity would come to them and say, we would like to use the money to do this, to see if it's feasible, that the board would consider that as funding. It is not our intent to go out and push franchise agreements or push recycling on other entities, but if they want to look into it and get more information on it, we would be willing to assist them. That was the part about that. We also provided ongoing community cleanup for political entities, including the City of Athens. Each year, we will pay $475 toward trash and $475 toward recycling to have a community cleanup. And that's been taken care of by several villages and townships in both counties, and it's available to the City of Athens. Your cleanup is large size, and it won't go very far toward what we would pay for a roll-off or two. So that's an ongoing program that's continued to.
And composting was added as a grantable mechanism this year?
They talked about composting as well, yes.
Thank you.
All right. Thanks for your comments and information.
Thank you.
I'll consider this read then for the first time, this renewal of approval of the solid waste management plan. We'll move on to the ordinance 6818. This is an ordinance closing a portion of Union Street between Court and Congress on Saturday, August 18th, 2018, from 8 a.m. to 10 p.m. for an uptown art event. This is introduced by Councilmember Butler.
Thank you, President Isley. Last week, we were privy to a presentation from representatives from the Athens Municipal Arts Commission, specifically Scott Windland and Kelly Lawrence. Present in the audience also was Chair Carol Patterson, and they presented a proposal for an Uptown Art event on August 18th, 2018, from 8 a.m. to 10 p.m. With that request would be the next few other accompanying ordinances. Essentially, it would be a music, art, and beverage festival. Thank you.
Okay. And yes, Councilmember McGee.
Thank you. As I had indicated in an email, I had some questions about the appropriateness of the location of this event. I think we're starting off choosing the wrong site for this. I think it would be much more appropriate to put it between Court and President Street, or not President Street, Court and College Street. I noticed that the university has tents up that they've had for several events recently, and I just say this because I have gone to some of the art exhibits in Columbus where they have large tents that protect the art. I'm not quite sure what this art event entails as far as either the selling of art or the use of any particular art. I support it wholeheartedly. I think Athens should be a very artistic city. I think this could be piggybacked on, but again, I think the particular location is probably something that questions should be asked whether it would be at a better location. So I just wanted to call that to the attention of council.
Councilmember Grace.
I also wondered during the presentation last week, because they were discussing having a roped-off beverage area for food and beverages at one end of the block, and then a stage for performance at the other end. And I was envisioning just one block and wondered if there would actually be room for traffic coming down Congress to continue on to Richland, or if that intersection would be blocked. If the intersection isn't blocked, there's not a lot of space between like BW3s and Court Street for vendors, and to have a food beverage area at one end and a stage at the other end. And so I also wondered if they had an idea of how many vendors they would likely have, and whether that is enough space. And like Member McGee mentioned, I thought, well, if it was on the opposite side of Court Street, they could continue farther if needed without hindering traffic as much. But so I had a similar thought, just whether there's actually enough space.
Thanks for the comments. Yes, Councilmember Fall.
Question was, did you contact the people who presented? I mean, the question, this is, one has to think that they've thought this through, and whether we contact them and offer another. I'm just wondering if Mr. McGee has done that, or whether it was just the email that went around.
If I could answer that very briefly, I have not done that, but I think this points out a very, I won't say dangerous, but a very difficult situation with our shifting over to committees in this form where members of council sit in the audience and are not asking questions. I sat there and I believed that some of these questions would be asked by the committee that was dealing with this particular issue. They were not asked. They were not answered. And I think that if we had this kind of format, that we're going to have this kind of situation come up over and over again. I believe, I could call them up and say, well, what about this and that? But right. I chose to notify council first of my position.
And they're not here to ask questions this evening.
Right.
And so, I mean, it makes logic. It's a nicer section of street, except for the new, maybe it's a celebration of the new, sidewalks and trees that we've done. Who knows?
Okay, Councilmember Kroll.
Correct me if I'm wrong, President Nisley, but I believe that simply not being on the dais doesn't preclude us from coming up to the podium and asking questions as citizens.
The committee members who are serving on the dais, as I understand, can then recognize a council member to ask them a specific question. So to make a general comment from the audience, I don't believe there's that option. So it does change the dynamic a little bit of the committee meetings proper, and I hear your comments, Councilmember McGee. And what it does, in a sense, then, is shifts some of this discussion from committee then to the first reading like we're having tonight. So there is that opportunity. And so we're still working through that format. But it would need to be that you would need to direct a specific question to McGee, Councilmember McGee, if he was sitting out there, not just ask if you have a general comment.
Okay, thank you.
That answers your question. Councilmember Katsas.
Yes, President Nisley, thank you. Thinking back to the presentation that did happen during committee, I like the idea that that AMAC had been in contact with some of the business owners on the street, and they were in approval of this event happening in front of their business. So I like it that there's a want for this in front of the businesses. Number two is I know that this is something that has been in discussion for a long time with AMAC, and it's something that. Mr. Winland is a promoter, and this is something that he brings as a skill set to AMAC, and I know that this is something that he has wanted to do, and they have talked about this for a long time. So I would believe that administration has vetted this and has looked at this for some time before it came before us. So I would, myself, I would have to believe let's try it. Let's try it in the place that they would like to do it for starters, and if it doesn't work, let's find out why and figure out how to change it in the future. Thank you.
Yes, Mayor Patterson, I think you had a comment.
I have been at several of the AMAC meetings where this did come up, and I concur 100% with Scott Winland. No.
Correct.
Yes.
Engage mouth. And he is a seasoned promoter. I mean, and I think that he has thought this through in detail and knowing the size of the space, as well as the enhanced sidewalk on the north side of West Union, and as has all of AMAC. And also take into account that this would be an inaugural arts event, and could it grow in the future? Hopefully. And if it does, it would likely quickly outgrow that particular space as they move forward. To address Councilmember Grace in your comment, I was over here nodding my head because the camera wasn't on me, and that is that no, the intersection of West Union and Congress / Richland Avenue would not be blocked. It would be closed within the confines of that particular stretch of street unto itself, just like the intersection of Court and Union would not be impeded either, that would be open. But again, Scott Winland, this isn't his first rodeo with putting on an event. This may be his first at doing an arts event, but he is a good judge of scale and what could occur in this space versus what is too much to occur in this space. And again, I don't know if Member Butler, who also sits on the AMAC and attends those meetings, wants to expound upon anything that I've mentioned, but I think that this is a good first start, especially in the time frame that they're talking about, where there's not a whole lot going on in the month of August before the student body swells to 24,000.
Okay. All right. I see that it seems like we've had the discussion on this one. We now have the other two ordinances that are part of this series of 3 for this Uptown Art event. So the next one is 6918. This is an ordinance suspending the enforcement of Athens City Code Section 13.04.10, unnecessary noise on Union Street and contiguous property to Union Street on August 18th, 2018 for an Uptown Art event. Councilmember Butler.
Thank you, President Isley. And again, I appreciate everyone's comments. I appreciate the mayor expanding on that as well. Quite simply, then, this would, for the event that we were just discussing, this would suspend the noise ordinance and to accommodate the bandstand. And more importantly, I think, as well, too, is acknowledgement that the fire department would in turn approve the stage location and the maintenance of a fire response lane. So again, these are the kind of things that do get discussed and vetted with the executive branch in order to make sure this is a safe event. Thank you.
Ordinance 7018 is an ordinance suspending the enforcement of Athens City Code, Chapter 11.04, vending, peddling, and soliciting to allow vending in a designated area on Saturday, August 18th, 2018 during an Uptown Art event, introduced by Councilmember Butler.
Thank you, President Isley. There are a few more talking points with this particular ordinance with regards to suspension of the peddling space and solicitation. Specifically, if fellow council members look at Section 3, there are some bullet points there. There is some guidance. Vendors currently holding a license to vend on East Union Street shall be allowed to continue to operate at a time and location determined by our new City Service Safety Director and the event organizer. Second bullet point acknowledges that a fee of $25 per vendor and food license permit from the Athens City County Health Department shall be established for all others per trailer. And then lastly, any such additional administrative rules and regulations as may be established by the City Service Safety Director. Section 2 acknowledges that prospective vendors shall register their name, address, and items to be vended with the Code Enforcement Office on or before August 16th, 2018 by 2 p.m. I think that covers some of the big talking points. Thank you.
Thank you. Ordinance 7118 is an ordinance amending the 2018 appropriation ordinance. This is introduced by Councilmember Reisner.
Thank you, Madam President. I'd like to make a motion to suspend the rules for 7118. The reason for the suspension is that there will be a Bureau of Workmen's Compensation payment that will be due June 1st, and we must appropriate those funds now in order to meet that deadline. It's dictated by the state of Ohio.
Okay. We have a motion and second for suspending the rules on Ordinance 7118. All those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed, nay. The rules have been suspended. Councilmember Reisner.
I'd like to make a motion to adopt 7118. Allow me to read it before we vote. Section 1, the 2018 Appropriation Ordinance 15017 is hereby amended by appropriating from the unappropriated balance the following sums. $140,000 to General Fund, Other Administrative, 101.120 TC300 for a refund check received from BWC, Bureau of Workmen's Compensation, $21,600 to Sewer Fund 750-637 TC300 for administrative services and increasing said appropriations by said amount. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. So we have the motion and second for approval of Ordinance 7118. Any other comments or questions from council members? Any other comments or questions from the public? All those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed, nay. Motion carries and the ordinance is approved. We now have announcements and other business. The first one being a motion to accept the auditor's April 2018 financial reports.
So moved.
Second.
Okay, we have a motion and second for approval. All those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Okay, thank you. And then other announcements, two of them that I have, one of them being the agenda for next week's committee meeting. We have indicated that all committees will be meeting. City and Safety Service, Transportation, Finance and Personnel, and then we'll have Committee of the Whole. And just an alert to council members and also to city administration that this is our last committee meeting before ordinances that would need to be read in June before we go on recess in July. So kind of a careful look to see what our needs are for this coming month and to make sure to get committee agenda items to our Clerk of Council, Deborah Walker, by Wednesday. Is that correct? Wednesday. Okay, thank you. And then the second one is an announcement that the President Nellis is from Ohio University is hosting a reception for Athens City and County leaders. And this takes place on Thursday evening, May 24th. And similar to our other occasions when we meet with Student Senate or meet with OU administration or staff, we do announce this to the public. So I just wanted to let the public know that. Are there any other announcements? Yes,
Just
Councilmember
a
McGee.
question, since next Monday is a holiday, I believe. Are we meeting that evening or Tuesday?
Good point. We're not meeting on Monday. We will meet on Tuesday.
Thank you.
Thank you. And any other announcements? Mayor Patterson, do you have any?
I do not.
Okay. We now have an opportunity for citizens to speak on legislative items and city services that were not covered on the agenda tonight. So any other items to which persons from the public might want to speak? Okay. Seeing none, entertain a motion for our adjournment. Do you want a second? I might second on that one if nobody else did. All right. All those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Okay. Thank you very much. Our meeting is adjourned at 8:11 p.m. Thank you.